Well, hey, welcome to All Packed Up, the Pakmule podcast. Today, we got Kansas, Hunter. Haley's off camera, but she's always around. And hey, Haley. And today, we're joined by Owen Fitzsimmons of the
Texas Parks and Wildlife Department.
Who does?
Webless Migratory Game Bird Program Leader is what my title is. But yeah, doves.
And for the non-academic people out there, what does that mean?
Yeah, mostly cover doves. I'm kind of the statewide lead for monitoring and management of doves, but I also cover a number of other species. Sandhill cranes, woodcock, snipe, rails, and gallinules.
You know, I was talking to Haley before you got here, and I looked you up on LinkedIn, and I got to say, the most surprising thing to me was, A, how young and good looking you were for being a dove biologist. So I thought that was kind of funny. But we wanted to have you out here, you know, here on All Packed Up. We talk about getting outside, being outside, with it being dove season. I just thought it'd be really cool. And you were referred to us as someone to have on here by Matt Hughes over at TWA, Texas Wildlife Association. And we just want to talk a little bit about who you are, what you do, how you got there, and what the outdoors looks like in your life.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I'd love to just go a little bit on the journey of, like, you know, that long title, non-migratory birds, right?
Webless Migratory Game Birds, yeah.
Yeah. How do you get to there? You know, how do you choose those birds?
Well, my whole career, I've always been an outdoors person. You know, grew up in Northeast Texas, hunting and fishing. We had some land that backed up to a bunch of timber company land, 500 or 600 acres that wasn't really, nobody was out there. And so as a kid, I ran around in the woods every chance I got, chasing squirrels and deer and birds. And I actually went to college for mechanical engineering. And I ended up at Texas A&M Kingsville, which is a really well-known wildlife school. And after a week in mechanical engineering classes, I was like, this is not what I thought it was. What else can I do? And I started looking through, and I was like, wildlife. That didn't even occur to me that I could do that. And so I immediately switched after 1 week of classes, never looked back. You know, ever since the start, I've always been just interested in birds and migratory birds in general. You know, the fascination with a bird that can move tens of thousands of miles a year, you know, that's the size of a Coke can or smaller. It's just
on instinct.
It never ceases to amaze me. So that's kind of how over the years I ended up where I'm at. And I've been here for 6 years in this position.
Okay.
And you were working on ranches and stuff before that and doing some other things?
Yeah. As a wildlife student in Kingsville, at A&M Kingsville, you got a lot of opportunities.
You studied wildlife biology? Or
range and wildlife management, technically.
And so you made it through both organic chemistries?
Yeah, I did.
See, for anybody that's exploring colleges and careers right now, I was at Texas State under the wildlife biology program, and organic chemistry apparently wasn't my strong suit. I studied really hard. I just couldn't figure it out on tests. And the professor came to me and was like, "Hey, I don't think this is your path. You need to do something else." And I changed my major because the organic chemistry professor told me that I needed to, and I made no other consideration. And I look back and I'm like, that is the most ridiculous thing ever. That guy should have figured out how to help me get through it, because I understand organic chemistry is important, but it's not the baseline of what you end up doing as a wildlife biologist. Right. And so, so hats off to you. You made it through.
Double organic.
I had a bigger problem with inorganic, believe it or not. For some reason, organic sort of made sense. Inorganic was just mumbo jumbo to me.
Yeah.
I used to laugh about, I used to call it a pseudoscience. I was like, show me a jewel, show me a whatever.
Yeah.
They would get really mad about that.
So you got out and you were working on some ranches, and was that because you were sort of waiting for another job, or you were practicing wildlife biology on ranches?
No, A&M Kingsville, and if anybody who's never been to Kingsville, that's the town that's kind of associated with the King Ranch, obviously. And there's a lot of leases on the King Ranch. There's the King Ranch itself. There's other nearby ranches. So there's a lot of opportunities for a wildlife student to be even in that program still enrolled and have opportunities to go practice what you just learned on a ranch, on a property. And for me, that was I got an opportunity to help start a waterfowl kind of guiding program or hunting program on this one lease. And at first it was just a guiding thing just for the season. And pretty soon I got hired on full time, and I did that for, 4 or 5 years on this private lease. And that was Hanna from Hanna-Barbera cartoons.
Yeah.
It was Dave Hanna was the guy that leased that. It's the Ojo de Agua lease on the Laurelis division just south of Corpus Christi.
Wow.
Really cool. Yeah. It's that property, 20,000 acres, borders the Laguna Madre just north of Baffin Bay.
Wow.
So we did a lot of fishing. It was a paradise for a 21-year-old wildlife guy,
No kidding.
Incredible.
Yeah.
What made you stop doing that?
I ended up getting a master's degree.
Okay.
I wanted to, there's a lot of people in that lifestyle, just the guiding and the hunting camp lifestyle. It's a lot of work. For me, like during those few years during the hunting season, I basically didn't have a day off, and even if you did, you're just recovering from the 20 days beforehand where you're up at 3:00 in the morning. You don't get to bed till 10 or 11 with all the guests that come through. And it's a tough lifestyle for anybody. After a while, you kind of get run down. So for me, I wanted to do more research. I wanted to do more, get away from the hunting side of it and more into wildlife, and had an opportunity to go back to grad school. So that's what I did.
That's awesome. Yeah. In grad schools where you chose like the specific birds and all of that stuff that you're doing now?
Yeah. I realized pretty quick through all the guiding and the hunting camp stuff that I was much more into waterfowl and birds, which I always have been. And so that's kind of what I wanted to focus on. And originally, my master's project was going to be a radio telemetry study on least bitterns, which is a small secretive marsh bird. And I was super excited about that. And then that kind of fell through because literally we didn't know enough about them back then to say, like, who knows that they might just go to Mexico, and we can't follow the radios into Mexico. That was when all the cartel stuff had just started. And so the funding sources were like, no, we don't want to.
I'm just a bird guy.
Yeah, we don't want to risk losing all this money on this project if those birds just leave.
Yeah,
and then we can't follow them for the rest of the year. So it ended up turning into a kind of a wetland project for Parks and Wildlife, who were the funders at the time, looking at specifically at a couple of WMAs on the coast, like managed wetlands versus unmanaged wetlands, and the different plant species, different bird species, what values each type of wetland and that kind of diversity across habitat types brings to the wildlife, basically. And so it was a really cool project. I spent a lot of time in the marsh, just kind of walking around, looking at birds and sampling plants and fighting off alligators and snakes. And
did you bring your binoculars here today?
In the truck, yeah. I never leave home without them, yeah.
When I think of Texas Park and Wildlife, I think, like park ranger. Mm-hmm. But obviously there's a lot more that goes into that.
Absolutely.
So like, what does that look like for you? Like, what does your position do to better the parks and wildlife in Texas? How does that kind of work? That's
a really good question. And as someone who came up in the wildlife programs in college, growing up, Parks and Wildlife to us was game wardens. That's kind of the face to a lot of people is the law enforcement side. But there's several different divisions. We have, coastal fisheries, inland fisheries, wildlife, which is what I'm in, state parks, law enforcement, infrastructure, who helps us build buildings and roads and everything else on our properties, HR, you name it, all the support divisions. And so it's a huge agency. I think we have 3,000 plus 3,500 employees, maybe. I think we're the largest state wildlife agency in the country. Wow. Don't quote me on that, but it's big. And so there's a lot that goes on that people don't realize as far as like job opportunities and things you can do to get involved. And so the wildlife side, which is what I'm in, obviously we take care of wildlife management areas. We have district biologists across the state that cover certain counties, and they work with private landowners because Texas is 97% privately owned.
Yeah.
The only way to do any habitat work is to work with those private landowners. And so that's kind of what they specialize in. My position is what we call a program position. So you have all these biologists out in the field and on certain WMA properties that do their work. But I kind of coordinate statewide monitoring, like say dove surveys. So I work with all these different biologists, 100 plus biologists across the state to implement these surveys so that we can get an idea of how many doves we have in Texas, how many doves we're harvesting, all these metrics that we use to kind of track population status and inform our management decisions. If that answers your question.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That's a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot. I think, people who want to get interested in animals or the outdoors, park rangers, law enforcement, that's always kind of the face, but there's a lot more opportunities
that's all I
out there.
About. It's like game wardens, right?
Yeah.
And you don't think about the conservation and the study and the research that you guys are conducting to say, yes, you can hunt that, you can, or Where the dove going?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And especially for the non-game biologists, like I get put in the spotlight some, before dove season forecast and that kind of thing. And hunters might look me up, but for non-game biologists, they really run behind the scenes and they do a lot of great work. And I think that's what a lot of young wildlife biologists don't realize is those kind of opportunities that exist in a state agency like this. It's really cool.
That's amazing. Mm-hmm. So how does that translate to your job, to the fun side of it? People want to know, hey, dove hunting looks real interesting. And from our perspective, we want to encourage and inspire people to get outside. And I tell a lot of folks, dove hunting is kind of the first and easiest way to start hunting if you're intrigued and interested in it. And Texas is a great place to do that. And we have a lot of public lands. How does somebody from your perspective get started on a dove hunting day? Well,
Texas has somewhere in the neighborhood of 300,000 dove hunters a year. And that is about a third of the dove hunters in the entire United States. So
wow.
No other state,
holy moly,
no other 2 or 3 states combined even come close.
That's incredible.
To the number of hunters we have and subsequently the number of birds we harvest. So if you want to hunt doves, Texas really is the place to be.
And is that because of the migratory flyway?
Yeah, it's partly that. We're kind of centrally located in the Central Flyway, so we catch all those birds coming down. We get a lot of birds from the Mississippi Flyway, other flyways as well. But we're also just a big geographically diverse state.
Yeah.
And we're located kind of at the right latitude for white wings and mourning doves and white tips. So there's a lot of good opportunity here. And it's also something that's always been a tradition and kind of a historical thing in Texas. How many people do you know? That's like the official start of hunting season.
Yeah.
September 1,
right.
That's kind of an unofficial holiday.
Right.
And so, I think out of those 300,000 people, the majority either started dove hunting as kids, or they know someone who took them out on their property, or they have some kind of mentor. But more and more these days, as I think Texas has started to shift demographically more urban, you're starting to see a lot more adult hunters who just want to get into it, and they don't really know how. And kind of like you said, dove hunting is kind of the gateway because you really don't need much beyond just a gun and a place to go.
Yeah.
Doves are pretty easy to identify versus say waterfowl, where they can be a real impediment trying to identify ducks on the wing. It's not like shooting a deer, which can be very intimidating for people. A big, mammal, with fur and blood and bones.
More emotional, certainly.
Yeah, more emotional. And so doves offer a very easy entry into the sport of hunting. And plus it's fun. You don't have to sit real still. If a kid or something, you take a kid, you can move around, you can talk. When the birds come in, it's a lot of action. They're challenging to hit. And the other thing too, I got asked about this a while back, is like how many birds get wounded. And I think more than most other bird or other wing shooting sports, a dove, you're either going to hit it and it's going to go down, or you're going to miss it. You don't get a lot of those, like say in waterfowl, where you knock some feathers off and they probably take some pellets and those things fly off.
Yeah.
Still strong. They're probably going to die later.
Yeah.
So those wounding losses, I don't think are as big of a deal as with doves. And so it's kind of like that instant gratification. Like if you hit it, you drop it, and you see
incredible.
that. So
that's awesome. And so from a public lands perspective, how does somebody go find some land and go hunt and know they're in the right spot? And
the best way to do it is just get on our website on the public hunting page. And so there's a few different ways to do any kind of public land hunting in Texas. We have our WMAs. So most of our WMAs, I shouldn't say that. A lot of our WMAs offer dove hunting opportunities. We have a few WMAs that actually specialize in managed dove fields. So there's Las Palomas WMA, which is Spanish for doves, in the valley. We have, I don't remember how many acres, several different fields of cultivated black oil sunflower, irrigated sunflower. So that's a huge kind of a maniacal couple of days when the white wing season starts.
Yeah.
If you've never seen that, you should get down there and try that. It's kind of crazy how just the clouds of white wings. We have the Roger Fawcett WMA, which is west of Fort Worth, right off I-20. They have a couple of big annual sunflower fields that we fund. There's Mason Mountain WMA, which is in Mason, Texas. They just acquired some new property that borders the WMA, where they have a couple of dove fields. It's going to kind of be specialized for doves. And then we have just opportunities where those are kind of our managed fields. Then we have WMAs that just do like they might do some native propagation just to kind of get some native dove fields going. So you've got those. You can always just call the WMA or get on the website and look at when you can go, what the rules are. We also have what we call our annual public hunt walk-in areas. And so that's close to 1 million acres, I think, total between WMAs and those. And so those are basically private lands that Parks and Wildlife leases so that you can have access to it. So you need an annual public hunting permit, which is $48 in addition to your license. But that'll grant you access to WMAs and also to these public walk-in areas, which you can just go. I mean, just show up and go anytime you want within the time frame that it's leased. And those are scattered all across the state. And then finally, we have some dove draw hunts. So we have a certain number of draw hunts that you pay for an entry. I think ours are $10 for the dove draw hunts. And these are basically, we work with certain outfitters across the state, kind of near big metro areas. Okay. San Antonio, Houston, Austin, Dallas, Fort Worth. And so we pay the outfitters for a certain number of spots. And then if you pay $10 for your entry, and if you win, you basically get a $200 day hunt to go out. And so that's been really successful. The hunters enjoy it because they get a really good dove hunt for $10.
Yeah.
A lot of them will do a repeat day the next day. And the outfitters really enjoy it because they get paid no matter what, if the hunter shows up or not. Yeah. But they also get a lot of repeat customers as well. So that's been a successful program. We're going to try to expand on that some. But that's a really good way to get people out that may not have the funds or the options to do that.
Do you find on the walk-in hunt spots, I guess the WMAs as well, that for dove hunting that most people are pretty safety conscious? Some people talk about being nervous to go out where it's just public and there's a bunch of random people out there with guns. In my perspective, it's got to be safe enough. Otherwise, TPWD would have shut it down if there were a bunch of people getting injured.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know that we have, I'm sure there are metrics on that. I think shotgun accidents are probably the most common hunting accidents that occur, and this probably revolves around dove hunting. But I don't think that's centered on public lands. Right. I think most people that are going to pay the $48 to go hunt a public spot and are going to take the time to go out there and try to hunt it are probably pretty ethical and safe. Yeah. In general, the times I've been out there, no problems. Yeah. Most people communicate well. They're friendly, responsive, certainly the ones that can be really crowded, like on opening day, I personally avoid opening day public land just because it is so crazy. Yeah. And at that point, I'm just like, I'd rather stay home and go later. But yeah, I think for the most part, people are pretty safe. Yeah.
That's been my experience on public lands. And when I was a junior and senior in high school, my buddy's dad had a lease in South Texas and he would take us hunting. And so that was my introduction into hunting, really. And then I went to college and I bought a Winchester 870 Express Magnum. So it'll shoot those 3-inch Magnums because you never know. And so technically it's a Wingmaster. And I bought a public land permit, and around San Marcos, which is where I went to school, I'd go out to these fields and I never had any issues. And I found for myself, since it was new to me, that I was overly cautious about everything and very considerate of where other people were and making sure that I wasn't pelleting them or what have you. But I will say the first time I got pelleted, I was like, oh man, how dangerous is this? And I realized like it's like small hail at that point. Right. It's just not really going to hurt you. It's not breaking skin. But I've also gone down South Texas, and I'm trying to remember what the unit was, but I had a pointer at the time, and I would go quail hunting in this area. God, it's right on the edge of a lake. There's a bunch of public land. It was incredible. I just went out with a buddy, and we were just walking land and flushed a handful of coveys. Some javelinas came out at one point, and it was like, this is amazing. This is public land, and it's so great. And I think that the challenge, the biggest challenge with Texas is that it's so privately held. And of course, you go out to Black Gap and stuff. There's some spots where there's really large acreage, but mostly these are these smaller sections kind of all over the place. And I know a lot of folks would be really excited to see, more and more public land that's added where people can recreate, where, out west, so much of that was reserved before it was developed and acquired and sectioned off, in the in the late 1800s. But I remember the first time experiencing that, and you go out to some area and it's BLM or it's it's just public state land, and you just camp and you walk and you hunt and you ride bikes and whatever. And I remember the first quail hunt I did was in Arizona, and I was driving around with Pakmule stuff, but I had my Jeep and I had a shotgun. It was quail season. I was like, man, I heard about Mearns and Gamble, and man, I want to go find some. And I found this spot, and I'm driving around, and it's this old cattle ranch that had been turned into a public land. And I've got a shotgun, and I'm just thinking, this is weird. I'm driving around on land, and I don't have like a public land permit thing, and I don't have I haven't checked all the boxes, and I'm making sure this is okay. And I eventually, by the old ranch house, I see a park ranger, and I pull up and I say, sir, I just introduce myself. I want to make sure this is public land I can hunt on, right? Yep, absolutely. Have fun. I've got a shotgun with me. That's cool, right? Like, I'm going to go hunting. Yep. I'm going to drive all over the place, wherever. Yep. And other people might be out here doing other things, right? Yeah, they might be. And, people that are actually bird watching might not love you. And
just shooting but
there might be people that are driving four-wheelers around. Yeah. And I remember thinking, like, this is the most incredible thing, this full access public land where it becomes this melting pot of all people doing all things. And it's all okay. Yeah. Where in Texas, we grew up with this, am I on the right side of the fence? Can I be there? And, people are very territorial.
Such a foreign concept.
It's so foreign. And, but I've loved going out west, and I continue to get more excited about, as Texas keeps acquiring these lands, it gets me so fired up, with TPWF buying them and turning them over to state parks and then to WMAs. The Powderhorn, that whole section of WMA that got opened up has been great. And then knowing that the park out at, what's the new park at West Texas that's getting opened? It slips my mind. Any event.
Probably mine too.
Yeah. Any event, it gets me fired up knowing that at some point we'll have a little bit more of that, large land stuff. And I believe there are a lot of landowners that are excited about it, because there's so many landowners that share their land and say, we'd love for you to come out and be a part of this thing that I own that brings me so much joy. It's selfish to own it myself. Yeah. And so while they're alive, they bring people out and share it. And a lot of those people are the ones that are working with Texas Parks and Wildlife to turn that land over so that it can become public. Just that generous spirit, which has been so incredible to watch among Texans, sharing land with Texans, and the camaraderie that happens out in the field. You meet people from all different walks of life that are out there just, leaning against a tailgate, waiting for a dove to fly over.
Made a lot of friends that way.
That's right.
Yeah. And right now, there's nothing official, but it seems like there's a sense of urgency in our agency right now to kind of grab land while we can, because they're not making any more of it.
That's right.
As more people, move into Texas and our population grows, that's just going to get harder and harder.
Yeah.
And I think you see the same thing on the flip side. A lot of landowners, like you mentioned, are starting to realize that too. The hesitancy there right now is kind of like, what does that really look like in Texas? Like you mentioned out west, where people just have basically free access to do whatever they want. That's a big fear for landowners in Texas is people trashing up the place, people ruining what they've built, what they've spent so many years and so much money to build.
Yeah.
And so I think those kind of kinks are being worked out, but I would guess in the next 10, 20 years, we're going to start to see a lot more properties acquired by Parks and Wildlife, and maybe some shifts in how we operate public lands.
Yeah.
Because I think that's on the forefront of everybody's mind right now.
Yeah.
Is how to make that look better, and how to provide more access, because that really is a limiting factor right now for everybody. On
the WMAs, what is the function of those? I know that there's drawn hunts, and I know that in some cases you're saying you can go for the dove hunt. Is there general access that the public has to go just be out there? Like at any point, can somebody with a public land permit go out and walk around a WMA, and can they camp out there, or camping's not so much the thing? It's
all WMA specific. Highly recommend before you want to go hunt, bird watch, anything, to contact the WMA directly. You can go on the website and find, their list of like the 2023, 24 hunting dates and what they allow and that kind of stuff. Sometimes they'll close the WMA down if they have a drawn hunt. Yep. They don't want anybody out there for that. And each one has different rules, but for the most part, you can bird watch. You can do certain things on certain WMAs. Yeah. Part of the WMA function, I think, is to preserve habitat in key areas.
Mm-hmm.
The other part of it is a lot of our WMA biologists will say this, is that it's kind of a demonstration area. Like this is how, if you apply these habitat management techniques, this is what your property will look like. And so landowners in that area can see that and they can kind of help promote, those activities.
Yeah.
And then the other part would be the public access, public use kind of thing. So there's all that kind of mixed in.
Yeah.
And our WMA folks are very, very passionate about the properties they're on.
Yeah,
and they do incredible work. And so, yeah, I mean, each one's unique and each one has kind of a unique personality, both in the land and the people that work there.
Yeah.
They kind of get their little WMA groups.
Yeah.
But I think to me that lends part of the fun of going out and experiencing that.
Certainly.
So yeah, I definitely recommend calling them and reaching out and getting specifics before you head out there. But certainly they want you out there. I mean, that's the purpose.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, let's ask some specific dove questions.
Okay.
So dove are migrating how many miles? Where are they during the winter, or during, I guess, the summer before they migrate into Texas?
So mourning doves breed everywhere from southern Canada to Mexico.
Okay.
Southern Mexico, East Coast to West Coast, very wide range. Where they migrate to is very dependent on the individual bird and what its lineage is, the instinct to migrate or not. There are birds, and we know all this from decades of banding records and band recovery records. Some birds don't go anywhere. We have resident birds in Texas around here that don't leave. They're here year round. Some birds might go a couple of counties. Some birds might fly to southern Mexico and back.
Interesting.
White wings, we're starting to see them expand, or we have been seeing them expand the past couple of decades north. So they've got a really interesting history in Texas. The southernmost 4 counties in the Rio Grande Valley, so Willacy, Starr, Cameron, and Hidalgo, were the only places you could find white wings. Maybe some in El Paso, Big Bend. Historically, in Texas, that's where they were. That was the very northern extent of their range. So the rest of it's all in Latin America, all the way through Central America.
And that's why I remember it was always rare to find a white-winged dove.
Yeah, it was always a border thing. Yeah. Right? You want to hunt them, you go down in the South Texas. And now, where I grew up in the piney woods of Northeast Texas, there's white wings in the pine trees.
Yeah.
And so they have, over the past few decades, just started to expand. And everywhere outside of South Texas, where they still use that original kind of habitat, they've kind of become urban birds. I mean, you see it here in New Braunfels.
Yeah, they
Austin.
fly around out here.
Yep. And they're very, very closely associated with urban habitat. And that's what we're seeing range wide. So New Mexico, Arizona, California, they're doing the exact same thing.
Interesting.
Everywhere there. But they historically were migratory. And we still have some that we ban that we'll get reports from Nicaragua, El Salvador.
Wow.
They go a long way. A lot of them.
All the way from here.
And I think a lot of the ones that have moved into the cities, they probably don't go anywhere.
Yeah.
Maybe the northern cities like Dallas and Lubbock and those areas, just because it gets cold, they might move. But we really don't know. And actually, we're funding a study that's supposed to kick off this next spring, putting GPS telemetry devices on white wings in urban areas to kind of start understanding where they go, how they're using these urban landscapes, because we really don't know.
Wow.
We assume they're eating backyard bird feeders.
Yeah.
Drinking in puddles in people's yards.
Sure.
But outside of that, we really don't know.
That's incredible.
What they do.
That's incredible. And so if you're a landowner, what type of habitat do you want to create to attract dove or hold dove or what have you?
Really? You need, during the breeding season, you want some.
When's the breeding season?
That would be like, say, April through July, August.
Okay.
You want, if you have some mature trees and some food nearby, and that could be ag food, agriculture, that could be small grains, that could be native foods, hay fields, anything the birds can find, seeds, because they need that nutrition. They're cranking out babies, they're incubating, all that. They need a high level of nutrients.
What would be some examples of native foods that they would just find that might be on somebody's property?
A lot of grasses, annual grasses.
Sunflowers a lot, right?
Yes. So sunflower, annual sunflower, the native sunflower is a big one. Doveweed or croton is another annual weed that grows a lot. Pig weeds and all the other annual weeds that people kind of like to mow down. Those are usually good food sources. But don't neglect grasses. Everybody wants doveweed, because they know that it's called doveweed. Yeah. People are attracted to that. But if you have a good native pasture with a lot of love grasses and windmill grasses and things like that, mourning doves prefer that stuff.
Oh, really?
And so they feed a lot. I mean, they can really feed. Mourning doves can feed on like 500 plus different plants in Texas. So really, it just comes down to having a diverse food source that they can access. And that means if your field's too thick, mourning doves need to feed on the ground. Mm-hmm. They scratch around, they find seed on the ground. So if you have a field that's too thick, they can't really get in there. If you don't have enough food. So sometimes it just kind of depends on how much rainfall you get and what you're managing for. A lot of times ag fields, people see them in ag fields in the spring, like say a milo field or a sorghum field, and they assume they're probably trying to get those sorghum seed. Yeah. But a lot of times what they're doing, because the sorghum seed hasn't really seeded out yet, hadn't headed out, what they're doing is feeding on all those grasses around the edge of the field.
Oh, interesting.
Things like that. So you need some food, or at least food nearby, but you need some nesting habitat. That's,
oak trees,
big mature hardwood trees are usually better. And then you need, if you have water, that's always a key, especially.
Everybody wants to hunt around a tank. Let's go sit by the tank. Are they really flying in and pulling water out of the tanks?
Yeah, absolutely. So especially in a summer like we just had, or like we're still having, water is definitely key. I mean, I was on a hunt about a week ago, or the Abilene hunt. And we had a big tank behind us, a couple hundred yards behind us on a different property that we couldn't hunt. And those birds were coming in and watering and then coming to us. And so literally some of the birds that we shot, it felt like rain coming down. They had so much water in them.
Wow.
It was just like.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So they're loading up. They can drink like 15% of their body weight in water. Wow. Just load up on water. So they're really adapted to dry conditions. Yeah. Drought's not as bad for them usually as some people might think.
Sure. Going back to,
yeah. And then I was going to say, finally it would be just cover, like loafing cover, roosting cover. And that kind of goes back to trees, mature trees, places where they can get in at night that a predator is not going to get them. So food, water, and cover is just like any wildlife. That's essentially what they need. Wow. And doves are pretty generalists. I mean, mourning doves nest in pine trees on the ground, depending on where they're at. Huh. Really, it's just about having available resources in an area that they can access. They don't want to be flying 15 miles to the next water source. Yeah. That kind of thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's incredible.
You spoke of the grasses and people underrate them. There's a regenerative farm up here, and they bring the pigs around, clear it out, and they put down this native chaos seed. And he said that since they've been doing that the last 3 or 4 years, they've noticed more birds coming in and more dove coming in, because they would prefer that over how the terrain has changed over time. And so it's just interesting to see how they respond to that. And stuff, and instinctually.
Yeah. And those native food sources are so much more nutritious than, corn or sorghum, or, it's kind of like us eating, well, candy versus you could survive off candy and sugar, I guess, corn syrup, natural. But you need nutrition, you need those vitamins. And so mourning doves especially, I mean, there's a number of cases and research studies where they prefer native foods over, if they have native foods here and ag here, they're going to eat the native foods first and then hit ag when they need to. But ag is important. I mean, agriculture has been very important since people came since Westerners, I should say, came to North America. We think, at least the books I've read, they think that there weren't near as many mourning doves back before Europeans showed up in North America than we have now, because basically as we moved west, we cleared all this land for agriculture, planted windrows, and just created the perfect mourning dove habitat. And so they used to be just kind of an East Coast species, and now they used to be East and then West Coast, and now they're kind of ubiquitous across North America because of the landscape changes.
I think a lot of people think about dove, especially in our circles, is about dove hunting. Is there like a really good fact, something super interesting about doves outside of hunting, or something when you go dove hunting you would want everyone to know about these creatures?
I mean, they're really incredible. Just in general, there's dove flying in right now.
Yeah, there's a few. There's some tall grasses and stuff over there, and a little bit of sunflower, and they fly around pretty good. We actually, our wildlife habitat here is pretty incredible. We had a baby rattlesnake out front of the entry doors a week or so ago. We relocated over into the pasture.
We have an earthworm terrarium, and
you got good soil. Good soil. Texas has more dove and pigeon species than anywhere else in the U.S. So that's a cool fact that a lot of people don't know. Mourning doves, white-winged doves, white-tipped doves, which are the other game species found along the border. We have band-tailed pigeons out in West Texas. And then we have red-billed pigeons, which are the Rio Grande border. And then we have common ground doves and Inca doves. So 7 different species plus Eurasian collared dove, exotics, rock pigeons. We have another couple species that are kind of occasional, show up in the U.S. But we're kind of a good habitat just in general for doves and pigeons.
Dove Mecca,
yeah.
And are dove a mate for life type of bird?
They're seasonally monogamous.
Okay.
A lot of them, that probably means that they're mate for life because the average lifespan is like a year and a half.
Okay.
So probably, but I think if they had a chance to, they pair up
sleep
for the
around.
Season. Yeah. All birds. So that's another thing. If you've never taken an ornithology class, is extra pair copulations. That's the official term for sleeping around. It's a genetically advantageous thing to do.
Sure.
Like the female might pair up with this dude because he's fit and he's got a good spot or whatever. But maybe that dude, has some other trait. And so when he's not looking, extra pair copulations. I'm always being approached. And so, bird mating strategies was one of my favorite subjects in school, and still is. There's so many different ways that they do it. Yeah, and it fascinates me. Yeah,
you're fun at parties, though.
So you must have a lot of bird porn on your phone.
I used to when I was in Corpus, I was involved in the Coastal Bend Audubon Club for a while. And so we'd always get these guest speakers every month. And whenever I couldn't find a guest speaker, I would just speak because I was kind of the local ornithology guy. And I would always do this bird presentation about the reproductive strategies. And it's a room full of old lady Audubon ladies. And it just red faces and blushing and oh my God, I can't believe you said that. It was one of my favorite things to do every year.
Fun.
I'm a fan of the adult avian niche.
Yeah.
What's your favorite bird?
Oh man, I've thought about this a lot. It's not a dove. I've thought about this a lot over the years. I don't know that I have a favorite. I used to work with coastal birds. Before this job, I worked in Corpus, and we worked with colonial water birds, so herons and egrets and skimmers and terns. And we also did a lot of shorebird work with these little, all the little birds that run around the beach.
Yeah.
That all kind of look the same. There were a few select species that we'd work on.
I call them mini seagulls.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a lot of them. And for some reason, I was always just really fond of terns and skimmers. They always looked... they just look clean and agile and they're just beautiful birds. I mean, something about them, it's just always been my favorite thing.
Yeah.
Skimmers especially.
Yeah.
They're just very, very cool birds. If people who are watching don't know what a skimmer is, they have a specialized bill where their lower mandible is longer than the top mandible and it's really thin laterally. And they fly just above the water and they dip that lower bill in the water and kind of slice it through the water. And anytime they hit a prey item, they snap that bill up. So they have these special adaptations where their neck can bend down really hard in case they catch something solid or whatever. And they're just really, really graceful. And they fly this high above the water.
That's incredible.
Soaring around. It's really, really cool.
Osprey fascinate me in terms of a just impressive bird, especially how they come down and then are coming out of the water with whatever the pound of fish is underneath them. Watching some of those slow-mo videos of them trying to come up and how they're trying to catch air and lift their body out of the water with these 3-foot wings or 2.5 foot wings on either side is pretty impressive to watch as well.
Powerful birds. Yeah.
And then they rise up and the fish is fighting, trying to still move its tail and swim down. And then all of a sudden it comes up out of the water and then there's this fish in its talons and woo, I'm going to my nest and your dinner, buddy.
It's cool. There's some slow-mo videos out there of them. Once they kind of get up, get some elevation, they just pull their wings in and just slow-mo like a dog, shake off all the water and then keep flying. It's just
these are the videos he has on his phone.
Yeah. This is the kind of stuff I watch late at night. Yeah. Or even, I've got a cousin, kind of a distant cousin who's was a fighter pilot and he got really into falconry. Mm-hmm. And so I sent him a couple of videos of these Cooper's hawks. They're like people would put cameras on a hawk, these like tree dwelling type hawks. And they would just like seeing a bird's point of view going like 30 miles an hour through woods, and they're tucking their wings. And I mean, just incredible agility to do that. And I used to be like, I don't care how much training you've got, you'll never be as good as this guy.
Yeah.
Like, you can never fly like this guy.
That's amazing.
Awesome. It's not even like, I think what's super interesting to me is like, that's a job, and I mean that like with a lot of respect. That's incredible. And you just don't think about all these animals, all these things that we see. And there are people whose job is to research them and track them and to understand and the importance. And because what happens to them also defines what's happening to us, right? Whether it's climate change or whatever. Yeah. So I think it's super interesting.
Absolutely. Birds are one of the best bioindicators is what we call them.
Yeah. If I see birds flying away, I'm getting ready to run good, normally.
Yeah. There are a lot of people.
That's what the movies tell me.
A lot of people that work incredibly hard. Like I said, kind of behind the scenes, like especially the non-game folks. Like I'm in a position where even though there may have been some declines in doves in recent years, there's still a lot of doves. And we're talking hundreds of millions. So it's not like they're a conservation concern, but there are people that's all they do is conservation concerned species. And it's like a race against time, a race against development.
I feel it's a lot more stressful job.
Yeah.
Because you're just watching this thing that you're studying die off.
Yeah. You're fighting against humanity's progress in a lot of ways. And you're just trying to figure out a way to keep it sustainable. And conservation is tough. It's a tough field, but very rewarding at the same time.
Yeah, it's awesome.
But I find, I think it's true that, well, as you think about the history of, let's just say, North America, Native Americans are here. They had a very deep understanding of game and animals. And I think they were sensitive to die off and the different things. They would use everything. They would only take what they needed, that type of thing. And I think that kept balance. Europeans came in and we saw bounty and just we're like, we can make money off this, knock it all down, like let's cut down the trees, let's shoot all the animals. That's when the market hunters were coming in and, these huge guns on the front of boats, just waylaying ducks that were all, on a float, rafted up. And now generally speaking, most people that are conservation minded are hunters because they see the effect and the balance that the wildlife has on habitat and vice versa. And they're also the ones that are out there pursuing and engaging and monitoring what's happening because of their pursuits and recognize when things are changing and are the ones to call to action. Hey, something's going on here. What is it? Versus people that, are just building houses and building buildings and who cares? Let's mow it down and pour some concrete. We need to make room for humans. And so it's such an important balance, the two. And people say it's such a dichotomy that we hunt the things that we want to have around and we just want to have them around so we can hunt them. And I think all of those things are true in nature. It is a funny thing to consider, but we don't necessarily want them around just to hunt them, although we do. But we also understand their importance in cycles. And so when we go fishing and we realize that there's less redfish and trout, well, why? They've always been here. Are we overfishing them? Has habitat changed? Is there an inflow that blocked up so there's not enough water coming in? Is the salinity change? Is there not enough oxygen? What's happening that these fish are disappearing? And it's so it's kind of we are advocates for these things that we love, and publicly sometimes that's a weird thing for people to understand.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point. I'm going to talk another hour about that just in general, but throughout history, in at least the last 150 years, no doubt to anyone's mind, like you can prove it on paper, hunters have funded conservation.
Yeah.
By vast majority of conservation that's taken place in America. And as we see that demographic kind of shift where we're losing hunters, or at least the proportion of the population that hunts is dropping because there's more people and they just don't hunt. Really, we got to bridge the gap and relate to people that don't hunt or that don't find value in the species and the wildlife and the habitats that we do. You just have to connect them somehow and really just show them that, this is a bigger part of the puzzle.
Yeah.
Really. And kind of like you mentioned, like we're as hunters or as outdoors people, we pay attention to there's less of this or things have changed. What's going on?
Yeah.
You don't have to be a hunter to value being outside and seeing these things.
That's right.
And we are all part of the ecosystem, and we're all connected together with what's out there and the species that we pursue, whether we photograph them, whether we shoot them, whether we just like to watch them, whether we don't really notice them.
Yeah.
You're still part of it.
Yeah.
And just, I think for us, we talk about R3, we talk about getting people, recruitment, retention, reactivation is the buzzwords to try to get people into hunting and angling. And I've kind of thought like, yeah, that's a worthy pursuit. But at the same time, we have to bridge out and figure out ways just to bring other people in that aren't interested in hunting and angling in particular.
Yeah.
And just, kind of like I used to say with the ladies at the Coastal Bend Audubon Club, when they found out that I hunted birds as the president of the Audubon Club, like, you're killing the birds that you talked to us about that we all love. I'm like, yeah, hunters fund conservation. You might not believe in that, but at the end of the day, we all want the same thing. We all want wild places and wild things to exist, and for its own sake, but also for us to enjoy, future generations to enjoy. And so I think more than ever, all the different groups, no matter what their backgrounds or what they really believe in, if it has a conservation component, whether you hunt or fish, it doesn't matter. We all need to band together and kind of point to the future, because we're battling big changes on the planet that are happening faster than anyone can react to, really.
Yeah. Owen, such a great time having you, and super interesting. How's the season look for dove as a sign off to today's conversation?
Yeah, I think we started out pretty strong. The drought really concentrated birds around water. A lot of people had good success. There were some other places where it was pretty slow. I think since the heat really hasn't broke yet, and we haven't had like the influx of cold fronts that we typically do, we haven't really seen any birds pushing down. And so I think that things have kind of slowed down as the time of this recording. But as soon as we start to get some cold fronts, I think there's going to be some really good opportunities to get out and jump ahead of those cold fronts and do some hunting and catch those birds coming down from the Dakotas and Kansas and Nebraska.
That's awesome.
So looking pretty good.
Good.
Love it. As Kansas said, it's great having you on, Owen.
Yeah.
Would love to know, something we always ask our guests when they're here is what the outside means to them. So if you have like a sentence or two, just what the outside means to you, being outdoors, a job that includes the outdoors, etc.
I think as of this moment in my life, this time in my life right now, just being outdoors and getting outside of the office, getting outside of the city setting that we all kind of live here on the I-35 corridor, and kind of brings me back to my roots, helps me kind of recenter my thoughts and get me back on track on why I do what I do and why I love to do what I do and why I would do this for free. Don't tell my bosses.
We'll cut that part.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That's
Thanks
incredible.
for coming on, man.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Did you have another question you wanted